The year was 587 BC. The nation of Israel was overthrown, the city of Jerusalem was leveled, and the people of Israel were taken into bondage in Babylonia. The survivors of the brutality and the death march found themselves in captivity in a foreign land, cut off from the holy city and their heritage, their hope and roots, and most important of all, from the temple, the center of their faith. No longer able to offer their worship around the Ark of the Covenant, unable to offer sacrifices on the altar, they literally felt cut off from God. Even worse, their captors made fun of them by mocking their ritual practices, mimicking their sacred melodies, and laughing at their holy hymns, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." No wonder the people asked, "How can we sing the Lord's song in the midst of such devastating loss and overwhelming tragedy? How can we offer hymns of praise when the temple has been destroyed? The Ark of the Covenant carried away. The sacred shrines and holy spaces desecrated. How can we sing when our whole world is shaken, when we are captive to terrorists and oppressors and God seems so far away?" You can hear their anguished cries at the very thought of their beloved Jerusalem in ruins. "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy." No wonder they cry, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" It's not easy. It's not easy to sing God's song in a conflicted culture. Not easy to lift up the values of God's kingdom in a society which mocks them. Not easy to sing the Lord's song in what often feels like a foreign land. But it is the song we have been given to sing. It is first of all a song of shalom in a world of violence. The Babylonian captivity was neither the first nor the last of the seemingly endless history of conflict and conquest, violence and retribution in the land called holy. The ancient saga of the politics of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, which only ends when everyone is blind and toothless. It is as old as the psalmist and as recent as the Gaza Strip. As this psalm reflects the people's grief, you can almost feel the all too familiar tug as grief turns to anger, and anger produces resentment. Resentment calls for retribution, and then retribution begets violence. And the cycle of violence ends with the part of the psalm that we don't like to read in church. "O daughter Babylon, you devastator, happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock." Verses 7 through 9. Let's be honest. As human creatures, we invariably turn to the ways of retaliation rather than to the paths that lead to peace. For the Hutus and the Tutsis, Israelis and Palestinians, Muslims and Christians, Protestants and Catholics, pro-life and pro-choice, right and left, black and white, Methodists and, well, Methodists. All too often our differences provoke resentment, and resentment begets violence. Violence calls forth retribution, and the cycle goes on and on. But against the backdrop of this age-old cycle of violence, the Bible holds out the vision of shalom, God's vision, God's kingdom of justice, God's idea of wholeness and holiness, of brotherhood and peace. Gary Haller, a pastor in Grand Rapids, Michigan, preached a series of sermons on the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah and his vision of shalom. He reminds us that in Hebrew, peace, shalom, is never only a negative state. It is never just the absence of violence or war or trouble. Shalom means the presence of justice. Shalom is the active presence of God, resulting in wholeness of life. It is life as God intends it, where God's love and justice is the bedrock of well-being and peace. The vision of shalom calls us to sing a different song, to live out a new set of values, to seek peace and fulfillment for all God's people, not just for ourselves. to proclaim liberty and justice for all God's people, not just for a nation, to ask God to bless not just America, but all of God's people, to do the hard work of uniting, not dividing, of creating a community which respects the sacred worth of each person in honesty and love. And often it feels like singing the Lord's song in a foreign land. Out of the devastating conflict and deadly cost of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln desired to bring the nation together. On April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse, and 2 nights later, a crowd of people gathered at the White House to serenade President Lincoln. They asked the president if there was anything he would like them to sing. Lincoln said, "Yes, there is one song I would like you to sing for me. I wish you would sing Dixie." They were stunned. Dixie, the theme song of the Confederacy? Why? Lincoln replied, "Because we are all one in the Union, not North and South, not Yankee and Rebel, not winners and losers, but one people. The Union has prevailed, and I want you to sing Dixie." And they did. And our nation has been working to heal the wounds ever since. In a country rife with division, hate, and prejudice, it is our time to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land. We are called to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land, a song of shalom in a world of violence. It is a song of hope in a world of fear. Here, even in this psalm of lament, you can catch a glimmer of hope. When they couldn't find the voice to sing, when they hung up their harps on the willows, they hung on to the memory, the vision of the kingdom, and in it they found hope. You can almost feel their spines stiffen and heads lift as they remember Jerusalem. Their captors may have taken the believers out of Jerusalem, but they could never take Jerusalem out of the hearts of the believers. And in that memory, they found hope. Times of uncertainty, times of crisis can call forth fear, which itself becomes terror. And in times such as these, it's easy to begin to live out of fear rather than confidence and hope. Perhaps President Roosevelt was at least half right when he said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Perhaps the terrorism we ought to fear most is the terrorism of fear itself, which begins to control our thoughts and actions, distorting our sense of reality, shaping our actions and controlling our lives. It seems like we have lived our lives in a foreign land for the past year and a half. For many, the threat and realization of a global virus have been deadly. The threat of additional variants is also real. There is always the possibility of something or someone trying to disrupt our lives, and there are legitimate enemies to be concerned about. But I refuse to live my life in fear. And as the church, the body of Christ, we are called to sing the song of hope, grounded in the presence of the risen Christ and the confidence of God's steadfast love. To hold on to hope in the promise of the God whose eternal kingdom is shalom, and whose will is justice and peace, to proclaim the word that ultimately the victory belongs to God, and one day every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. To be the people of God means to hold on to the hope that one day we will be victorious. One day we will walk hand in hand. One day all his children will be free. One day we will live in peace with love and justice, where there is no crying and there is no dying. We are called to sing a song of hope in a world of fear. And we sing a song of love in a world of hate. It is so basic to our Christian faith that it ought to be nothing more than restating the obvious, but it isn't. Jesus' central teaching is love God, love your neighbor, love your enemy. When asked, Jesus said that the greatest law was love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:37-39. This command is in contrast with the message of many contemporary leaders and literature, which basically focuses on you, not on others. how you can be a better person, how you can find more fulfillment, how I can be rich, successful, happy, rewarded. Not that any of this is so bad in itself. We do have stressful lives, and you should pay attention to your own needs. It's just that these authors, in presenting their perfectly sensible advice, somehow manage to ignore Jesus' radical and demanding focus on others. At the moment, the idea of Jesus has been hijacked by people with a series of causes that don't necessarily reflect his teachings. The Bible is a long book, some of it conflicting and hard to puzzle out, but love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself is a good place to start. There is no disputing the centrality of this message, nor is there any disputing how easy it is to ignore. To sing the song of self-giving love for others is like singing the Lord's song in a foreign land, the song of love in a world of hate. For many years, Tom Starnes was a pastor outside Washington, D.C. One day he preached a funeral sermon for a family who had lost both of their sons in successive incidents in Washington. One, a murder. The second, a car accident. Tom named the losses for what they were: terrible, incomprehensible, tragedy. But in the second funeral, he told the story of a hospital administrator who had been through tough times himself. Multitudes of administrative problems, coupled with his compassion for patients who flooded the emergency room every day, drained him of energy and spirit and soul. One Sunday in worship, Tom said his friend seemed to be singing exceptionally loud, not always on pitch, but loud and strong. On the way out, Tom said, "Gee, you seem to be enjoying the singing this morning. You nearly blew me out of the pulpit." The wearied hospital administrator looked him in the eye and said, sometimes all you have is a song." That's what the psalmist learned and what we can learn. Sometimes all we have is a song. Sometimes it's a song of shalom, God's justice and peace. Sometimes it is a song of hope in a world ruled by fear. And sometimes it's a song of love in a world of hate. But if it is the right song, if it is the Lord's song, the song is enough, and we can learn to sing it even in a foreign land. So wherever you find yourself, whatever land you are captive in, regardless of what side of the latest issue you are on, seek the Lord's song, God's song of shalom, of hope, and of sacrificial love, and sing that song with faith and with grace. God bless you all.